It is 1943, and 50 Mitsubishi Zeros slice low over the Pacific. For 2 years, they have ruled these skies, confident that American fighters will dive away. Except this time, the blue shapes don't run. They climb. Tracers streak out from the Zeros first, 20mm shells slamming into American fuselages, only to find armor and self-sealing tanks that refuse to die. The newcomers roll, pull, and surge upward on the back of 2,000 horsepower. What should be impossible is happening. Heavy carrier fighters are outclimbing the lightweight predators of the Pacific. Then, the Americans return fire. 6 50-caliber Brownings per aircraft, long rippling bursts that break Zero formations like paper. The Grumman F6F Hellcat has joined the fight, and the balance is about to shift. Rewind to the nightmare that made it necessary. In 1941, the U.S. Navy's Brewster Buffalo and early Wildcats faced a foe no one yet understood. Pearl Harbor burned in under 2 hours, the Philippines followed, and the A6M Zero, long-ranged, agile, and deadly, seemed unstoppable. It wasn't just faster, it humiliated opponents, ambushing P-40s and B-17s, before many American pilots even saw the attack. As one Japanese officer later admitted, their Zero fighters were the pistons that drove early victories. Yet, even before the war, the Navy had been sketching a different answer. A carrier fighter with oceanic range, a sledgehammer armament, and speed well past 300 millimeters. Chance Vought grabbed the most powerful engine available, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, and turned it into the F4U Corsair, the first U.S. single-engine fighter to exceed 400 millimeters. But the Corsair had a cruel flaw. It couldn't consistently land on a carrier. The long nose hid the deck, the gear bounced, and the wings stalled unpredictably. So while the Corsair terrorized from island strips, a true carrier solution was still missing. Until then, the outgunned F4F Wildcat had to hold the line. Lieutenant Commander John Thatch, hunched over kitchen tables with matchsticks, worked out a way for slower, tougher aircraft to beat spry Zeros. At Midway, his Thatch Weave debuted, 2 Wildcats crossing and recrossing so that the hunter always faced the guns of a wingman. Japanese aces were stunned to see bait flip suddenly into a trap. The tactic bought time, precious months for engineers to deliver the fighter the fleet needed. Grumman listened to the men who would fly and fix it. They raised the cockpit for visibility, built submarine-strong landing gear for brutal deck arrivals, covered vital systems in armor, and made the airplane easy to patch together at sea. Then they bolted in the same R2800 as the Corsair. The F6F Hellcat was tougher than the Zero and easier to fly than the Corsair. Folded wings made it a perfect hangar companion. Grumman bragged it was designed to be flown by 200-hour farm boys, and the Navy intended to prove it. On September 1, 1943, from the deck of USS Independence, new Hellcats roared into their first hunt and ran down a Kawanishi H-8K Emily flying boat. A clean kill, both pilots home. Weeks later, over Tarawa, green American aviators met veteran Zero pilots, and the calculus had changed. The Zero's rifle-caliber guns and cannons struggled against the Hellcat's armor, while the Hellcat's 50 cals shredded Japanese formations. 30 Zeros fell for the loss of a single F6F. The Hellcat soon flew under other flags. More than 1,000 went to Britain's Fleet Air Arm, which took them to Norway's fjords and the Mediterranean. Pilots returned with machines peppered by flak and cannon fire, still flying. One airman joked there were more holes in the airplane than airplane around the holes. And yet the big cat kept purring. The war, however, learned to fight at night. Japan began torpedo bomber raids after dark, hoping to slip past combat air patrols. The U.S. answer was a tiny hunter-killer team. two Hellcats with a radar-equipped TBF Avenger between them. On November 26, 1943, Lieutenant Commander Edward "Butch" O'Hare led the first mission. In black water and starlight, confusion and gunfire exploded at close quarters. O'Hare's lights vanished. His wingman saw him veer away and drop into darkness. The Navy's first ace was gone, and the night war had exacted its price. Japan fought back with new steel. The Kawanishi N-1K Shiden, reborn from a floatplane project, arrived with automatic combat flaps and rugged construction. In the hands of the elite 343rd Kokutai, led by Minoru Genda, it could knife-fight a Hellcat on even terms. Yet, brilliance couldn't cure scarcity. Unreliable engines, bombed factories, and thin supply lines meant too few Shidens reached the front, and too late. At high altitude against B-29s, they struggled to climb in time. In the summer of 1944, the rematch came over the Philippine Sea. More than 20 carriers launched over 1,000 aircraft in the battle that Americans would call the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Amid that storm, Lieutenant Alexander Vrasiu's Hellcat had a bulky supercharger, but he pressed on, dropped low, and in 8 minutes downed 6 dive bombers. It was emblem and outcome, a rugged fighter, flown by a steady hand, turning industrial might into air superiority. By war's end, more than 12,000 Hellcats had rolled off lines, claiming thousands of enemy aircraft for comparatively modest losses. The monster wasn't the fastest of the war, but it was the carrier fighter that broke Japan's grip on the Pacific sky.